Welcome back, Bulldog fans. It's the second week of the season. Yes, it's a holiday, but we're working because so are the Bulldogs as Joe Moorhead gets the team ready for the first road trip of the season and the first Power 5 matchup of the season. Steve, we've talked in the summer about Kansas State. We kind of circled this game as it's going to be a real tell on what the Bulldogs have done in spring and preseason. Now, yes, we'll give Stephen F. Austin credit for putting up a challenge to some extent, but now you really found out what had the Bulldogs truly got for 2018.
That's true. Kansas State's expected to be a bowl team. They were a bowl team last year. Coach Bill Snyder, always very sound defensively, and especially with special teams. You expect them to be very fundamentally sound. So we knew this would be a real test. Now, their early returns of the season, I think most odds makers would say Mississippi State's far and away the better team. Mm-hmm. State obviously destroys an FCS opponent 63-6, one of the highest point totals and margins of victory in program history. And then Kansas State needs a 15-point fourth quarter to win 27-24 over South Dakota. But that should not be a harbinger of things to come because Kansas State's so well coached. They'll figure some things out. Bulldogs will get a very solid test this week.
And talking in real vague generals, too. We've seen Kansas State in seasons past start slowly. And just because they're a sound team, they're well coached, they know what they are, they know what they do, they can always fall back on what they do well. And that usually carries them on to a very solid season. They're not going to win a championship out there, but they're always going to knock some people off. They've got an SEC guest coming to campus, and remember, I think you and I both a few years ago watched Auburn when they had to really struggle. That was a great Tiger team that went up there and struggled with the Wildcats. So the Bulldogs know they're walking into a fight this weekend.
They do, and I think Kansas State really wants to make this an ugly game. Not ugly in the way that the South Dakota game was, but they want it to be a game that's won on defense, a game that's won with a running game. And they're a dual threat, very similar to Mississippi State. They run a lot of the same concepts, a lot of RPO-type stuff. They want their quarterback to be a running threat. And so Bulldog defense should have a pretty good idea of what they want to run. And Joe Moorhead, obviously, very familiar. He shared some comments with us, about Coach Snyder after the press conference today about the respect that he has for him. But the Bulldogs offensively should be able to go put up some points on them. But you and I both know, David, the big concern this week is about Nick Fitzgerald not having the benefit of a tune-up against an FCS opponent. So he hasn't been hit since that horrific injury in the Egg Bowl. He hadn't had any contact. And so it's going to take a quarter or so to maybe get him going. So if Nick comes out and has a big start, watch out. Mm-hmm. But I think that's really the concern is what happens at first quarter with Fitzgerald.
And talking about Coach Moorhead's comments on Nick Fitzgerald, said he served his time on the scout team last week with maturity, handled it well. He was a presence on the sideline, very reassuring to Keaton Thompson, and just did what a veteran is supposed to do once you make a mistake. He's redeemed himself from that, and he certainly goes in as the starter. A lot of confidence in there, but like you said, he hasn't seen anybody in his face mask now for almost a year who's coming to try to hit him. So you feel better about a fifth-year senior handling that, but still there's bound to be a little bit back there saying, do I want to take a hit here?
I don't really worry about Nick and from a toughness standpoint. I think the situation with him is just going to be mechanics. This is a new scheme. He didn't have the benefit of kind of having some live competition to compete against this past weekend. So the rust is really more the factor to me than really more the mental toughness. If you know Nick Fitzgerald as we do, you know that he'll go out there and bring a good effort. He wants to get into the flow of the ball game, and I think he wants to show not only the opponents but his team that he's back and 100% ready to go. So that's really, I think, where this game lies. If State can get going early with Nick Fitzgerald, I think that spells a lot of trouble for Kansas State.
One of the matchups of this week we'll be discussing, too, is Kansas State has a reputation, well-earned, of being a very strong team against the rush. In fact, last year they had one of the worst pass defenses. But as Coach Moorhead said, that's because teams realized they had to throw against them. And, of course, they're playing in the Big 12 where everybody chucks it and not many are running teams. So you can get carried away with statistics and misleading. I don't expect that to deter the Dogs a bit from going with their bread and butter, which is Nick Fitzgerald, Kylan Hill, Eris Williams, and that offensive line getting the job done.
I think certainly, too, in Nick Fitzgerald, that's kind of his calling card as being that running quarterback. He only threw a handful of passes, I think, as a high school junior. And then as a senior, with the 1 year he was a starter, they did open it up a little bit, but really he was their main threat. That's kind of been what's gotten State going is Nick Fitzgerald running the football. Once State can establish the halfback dive with Williams or Hill, it makes that zone read, that whole option game work. That's what I think Nick's comfortable doing. I think what we're going to see this week is State will mix and match a little bit more than we did this past weekend. I think this weekend you might have ran 10 plays. If that. And so they'll open – no RPO stuff was run this past week, and that's really a tenet of the Moorhead offensive system. So I think we'll see a lot more of that. And I think Bulldog fans would be wise to kind of sit back and understand you hadn't seen anything yet when it comes to this offense.
Well, not only that, as disappointed as some people were with the passing percentages in the first game, I think the flip side to that is a lot of those incomplete passes, you and I and everybody in the stadium saw a lot of wide open receivers. It wasn't the guys were not there. They were there. The passes weren't delivered to them. So you can take that as a positive. Now you put your number one quarterback out there. If you get those same guys open, as you say, watch out.
And that's one of the things, David, you can see early in the ball game. Joe Moorhead knows how to use his personnel to create matchups that are advantageous for the Bulldogs. Every single early pass play, you had a receiver running so dangerously wide open that the quarterbacks almost second-guessed themselves a little bit. As Keaton Thompson told us on Osiris Mitchell's long touchdown, he was scared he didn't see the safety. And so, I agree with you, David. What that tells me is that Coach Moorhead has instilled his offense and gotten these guys to understand a new mindset, and they believe in the scheme. And if they didn't until this past Saturday, they understand their coaches can put them in a position to be successful.
Turning quickly to defense, as you set a record for passes or tackles for losses. You got sacks. Montez Sweat starts out the season great. Jeff Simmons, a great strong start there. Coverage. There's some angst still about the coverage. You still got some questions, certainly at one of the cornerback positions with things like that. But you know the athletes are there. Do you think that can get fixed this week?
I do, David, and there's a couple reasons why. Number one, you're almost primarily bump and run man coverage last year. You're acclimating now to running a lot more zone. So there's going to be some growing pains with that. I thought Cameron Dancer played pretty well, and according to some of our folks on social media, nobody played well despite the fact that we won by 57 points. We were lucky to do so. But I thought Dancer played exceptionally well. I thought Peters had some moments, but there was some inconsistency there. But I think some of that is just playing a new scheme for the first time. Everybody says, and it's kind of an old adage in football, that the biggest improvement you make all season long is between game one and game two. We expect to see that from the secondary.
Well, if you improve on that tackle for loss average, you really got something going. And quickly on special teams, Keith Mixon put on a good show there. We're really proud for him coming back off the surgery, and he had a straight line speed, maybe some lateral movement we weren't expecting to see. Brian Cole, good on kickoff return. Question mark, place kicking and punting. Tucker Day had some pretty good hang time, got some rolls, but the distance wasn't quite there. It seemed like he was being a little too careful, and then you miss a field goal that you just can't afford to give away 3 points in games like this coming up.
That's true, David. The most consistent kicker was Scott Goodman. The kickoff pass was from Brandon Walk-On that we didn't anticipate being a starter. He is a starter, and I don't think there was any concern all weekend about his ability. But you're right. You hate to see Jess Crispin go out and miss a field goal right out of the gate. And then Tucker Day had some good roll on some punts. It's one of those things you almost wonder, too, because of the fact that there was a competition where these guys may be looking over their shoulder just a little bit, thinking, you know what, hey, I got Coach Jones watching me here. I won the job, but now I got to keep the job. And so maybe they'll settle in. But, yeah, that's got to be something. We can't give away any possessions, any real estate, or any points this weekend.
So the Bulldogs getting ready for their first road trip, their first Power 5 opponent. Got a lot on the line. Obviously, the state wants to have the season they really expect to have with this team, and this will be their first true test. According to Coach Moorhead, injury situation fine, a few bumps and bruises. Nobody's really hurt. Everybody's available. Of course, Corey Thomas and Nick Fitzgerald both return this weekend. Michael Story remains suspended, and people are asking about a couple of receivers who did not play. That was not involved with suspensions. They just did not play in the game. There was no reason that Malik Deer and Jamal Couch didn't play other than just the position coach's decision. We'll have some updates. We got a lot of right from coming days. We'll be talking to Luke Getzey and Nick Fitzgerald tomorrow, Bob Shoup on Wednesday. We'll have plenty of material this week, and it's time for us to hit the road, Steve. So for our whole team here at Gene's Page 24/7, for Steve Robertson, this is David Murray.